Good evening and welcome to the February 11th meeting of the San Mateo Planning Commission. Please. Under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Can we have roll call, please?
Yes, Commissioner Williams,
Present.
Commissioner Maldonado,
Present.
Commissioner Ebenezer,
Present.
Vice Chair Mallory,
Present.
and Chair Etheridge.
Present.
And so I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Rodrigo Orduña, the new planning manager, and he just has a few words of introduction.
Yes, good evening, everybody. I'm very excited to be joining the City of San Mateo Planning Division. Again, Rodrigo Orduña. I come from Alameda County. I was the Deputy Planning Director there for 15 years. Before that, I was with the City of San Jose. And before that, with the City of Oakland. So just a bit more background. My undergrad is in architecture and my graduate degree is in planning with a concentration in urban design. So I'm very interested in urban infill and all the things that are happening in a city such as San Mateo with our three transit stations and the downtown and everything that's going around. It's very exciting times, not only for the Bay Area, but specifically for the city of San Mateo. So I'm very happy to join. So,
Welcome. Thank you. It's good to have you here. Boy, in planning, they go in terms of decades. It's not, I was 1 year here or 2 years here. That's great. Okay. We will go to agenda item 1 on the agenda. As many of you know, tonight is the Planning Commission meeting is Ron Munakawa's final meeting as Chief of Planning, as he is retiring this month from service to the city. So we have added an agenda item to tonight's calendar.
I'm sorry, just for housekeeping, we might want to check if there's any public comment.
Oh, I thought that would be after the ceremonial item.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize. I thought you were already going to agenda item number 1. Okay, sorry.
Okay, well, before the consent calendar, right? So I would do public speaking before the consent calendar?
I just thought you were under public hearing already. My mistake.
No. Okay. Yeah, we had a revised secret. Okay. So we have added a secret, very secret agenda item to tonight's calendar to recognize Ron and his contributions. And so to that end, I think each of the commissioners had something brief to say about Ron. And so if we could start with Commissioner Maldonado.
I want to say congratulations, Ron, on your retirement, and also I want to thank you for, I believe I've been on the commission for a little bit under 2 years. I know when I first got on the commission, your response to me was, there are no dumb questions, ask away. And I appreciate that openness and you having always your phone available and your office hours available. So I wish you very well in retirement, and don't miss us too much.
Commissioner Ebenezer.
Well, Ron, it's been a great pleasure being a planning commissioner and working with you. You've been a great adversary for over the last 5 years, and you've taught me a tremendous amount of patience. Seriously, I think we've had some great times and some fantastic projects to look at together, and your leadership has been exemplary. You've brought us through some tumultuous times on this commission and kept it all together, and your assistance and guidance through the years has really helped me understand the procedures and what is feasible and what is not feasible. So thank you for all you've done for me personally and for what you've done for the city for many, many years. You will be greatly missed, and I've had the great pleasure of watching you and having you as a mentor in this capacity. So thank you.
Commissioner Mallory.
Ron, I just jotted down a few notes. What about the EIR? The building setbacks gone too far. The floor area ratios not to code on that new San Mateo abode. But Ron's been there to help us see how the world of planning can be. We've looked to him to be the rock during the increase of our housing stock. How will we cope? How will we know historical knowledge? To whom will we go? You will be missed, Mr. Guru of Planning, but after 40 years, you deserve a rest, and we on the commission wish you the best.
Commissioner Williams.
Hi, Ron. Congratulations to you, and I really hope I know you're going to enjoy your retirement. I just wanted to say a couple words because I first crossed paths with you at the counter probably, or coming and going to the planning department as I was at the counter and meeting with your staff. And then you met with the AIA San Mateo County chapter, which is the American Institute of Architects. And I remember, I don't know how many years ago that was now, quite a few, but it was so informative. We had you and some other folks as well speaking about, how the planning department works to a bunch of architects that, probably didn't know all they were supposed to know. So it was my first experience crossing paths with you, and so informative. I only had a short time on the planning commission with you, and I'll miss that, but congratulations to you.
Well, Ron, you certainly have an enormous amount of respect from the community, as the commissioners have exemplified. And I'm looking forward to seeing the city recognize you formally next week for your 40 years of service at the council meeting with an official proclamation. But I also wanted to take just a few minutes to recognize you, since this is your last planning commission meeting, as the admin and as the chief of planning. Ron joined the city in February 1980 and was appointed chief of planning in 2001. A quick perusal of the San Mateo Daily Journal archives from 2001 include controversy about new high-density projects and intolerable traffic. So there's that. But there's no doubt that the transformation of the city during Ron's planning tenure has been remarkable, not just in population, growing from 77,000 to 105,000 during that time, but some significant, impactful developments during that time. Just to name a couple, the Century Downtown Cinema, Main Street Parking Garage, and Transit Center, the City of San Mateo Rail Corridor Plan, the Bay Meadows Plan, the new main library, countless others. I've only worked with Ron for the last 2 years as a part of the Planning Commission. His comprehensive training and guidance has been second to none. Ron's memory archives are extensive and somewhat ridiculous, as he always knows when a project has historic comparables or a similar situation has been encountered in the past. This always available resource will be sorely missed. Ron has been a terrific partner and sounding board for me personally to ensure that the Planning Commission is always assessing items in scope and staying fact-based. This is especially important in an environment of evolving state regulations around housing that planners must stay in the know about. Ron's candor and open communication are characteristics that I try and emulate, both in my city volunteer roles and in my professional career. I've had just a couple of entertaining debates with Ron about specific meeting staff memos and the like, and you simply could never guess that Ron has been in his chief of planning role as long as he has, because my observation is that he tackles every project and meeting with an attention to detail and an enthusiasm that one might expect from somebody new in their role and eager to make a mark. Well, you definitely made a mark, and you have earned the formal recognition that you have coming from the city, as well as an enjoyable retirement. In fact, with 40 years of service, you have a permanent mark going up on the wall outside, which I would like to share, and hopefully not break.
Mike, what is it?
Oh, you didn't see it? Sorry.
Oh, perfect.
Looks like retirement.
I'm gonna put this down here because that is too precarious. In addition to that mark you made on the city that will be permanently reflected on the wall, you made a mark on myself and all the commissioners here, and we do thank you and wish you the best of luck in the future. And we do have from the commissioners a small gift for you. I think we're all gonna. Take a picture. I'm gonna put it up on right here. Okay. Right here, basically. Okay, there we go.
So thank you to the commission for those very gracious remarks. I would say that one thing that has been characterized by planning commissioners in the past, as well as this commission, which I'm sure will be continuing in the future, is, and I think it's even posted here on the walls in terms of respect, because certainly as I mean, I think we can joke about it now, but there are times where you might not have agreed with the staff analysis or the staff recommendation, but it has never been characterized by you've done something or the staff did something. It was more of, oh, I understand what your recommendation or what your analysis is. However, in my reviewing the situation, I think these are facts that should be used for a basis, and I'm not clearly in identical step with the staff recommendation. And I think that's why the council appointed you, because you come from a variety of backgrounds, a variety of experiences, and the one thing I've always appreciated with the commission is it's always been very respectful, always very supportive, and even when we've disagreed, staff and the commission have been able to function as a team, and that's been very important. And so for that, I'd like to thank you as well as all the past commissions. The other thing I should note is that certainly there are some projects that I've worked on, either as a project planner or chief of planning, but the only significance of those are derived from the people that I've worked with here on the city staff, some who are in the council chambers tonight. So I do appreciate it. And, you know, I've been with Rodrigo for just 2 days, but I'm convinced that he is more than, he'll be a great addition to the city staff. He'll be a great resource for you, and I think it will be a great partnership moving forward. So, thank you.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Ron, and congratulations. Okay. Before we move to the consent calendar, do we have any speaker slips for public comment on any items that are not on our brief agenda?
We do not.
Okay. Then I will close public comment. And we will move to item number 2 on the consent calendar, which is approval of the Planning Commission minutes from the meeting of January 29th, 2020. I have reviewed the minutes and had no comments. Do any commissioners have any comments or feedback on those minutes that were provided? Okay, can we have a motion to approve?
I motion that we approve the minutes of the Planning Commission meeting of January 29th.
In a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
It carries 5-0. And now we will, okay, so that closed, so we have no, so I closed the public hearing, and we had no public comment, so we'll go to agenda item 3 on the calendar, which is the draft 2020 Climate Action Plan, General Plan Amendments, and addendum number 2 to the General Plan EIR.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Andrea Chow. I'm the Sustainability Analyst with the City Manager's Office, and I have the pleasure of working on sustainability initiatives, including this wonderful project, the update of our Climate Action Plan. It has been an exciting process to go through the update of our Climate Action Plan, very collaborative. We've been working very closely with our Community Development Department as well as Public Works. And so we're here today to discuss the update of our Climate Action Plan. And I'm accompanied by our consultants from PlaceWorks that will be sharing the presentation with me, so I want to take a moment to introduce you to them. This is Eli Crispy, and then as well as Tammy Seal. And they were actually also integral in our adoption of our first Climate Action Plan, and I'll dive in. So our goal today is to review the draft 2020 Climate Action Plan, the General Plan amendments, and the addendum to the General Plan EIR. The Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission has really been the advisory body throughout the development of the 2020 Climate Action Plan. So today we're really focused in looking for your feedback on the associated documents, the General Plan amendments, and the EIR addendum that will accompany the adoption of our Climate Action Plan. I wanted to start the presentation by providing a little bit of background on our Climate Action Plan, often abbreviated as CAP. The city first adopted a Climate Action Plan in 2015, and what this plan is a comprehensive strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions in our community. The plan identified greenhouse gas emission reduction measures, as well as implementation strategies to really get us to those GHG reduction targets. At that time, it was integrated into the general plan, and the targets were consistent with the general plan for 2020, 2030, and 2050. We also aligned the policies and strategies in the Climate Action Plan, and it was adopted as an appendix to the general plan. So 5 years later, why are we looking to adopt the Climate Action Plan? We've made a lot of headway on the implementation of the measures that are in that adopted Climate Action Plan. We're actually on track to meet that 2020 goal to reduce emissions. Meanwhile, the state has updated targets for climate goals across the state towards 2030 and 2050. So this is a good opportunity to review those strategies and update those targets. And we think this is an opportunity to build on our Climate Action Plan success and integrate with this general plan update. So we began the process of updating the Climate Action Plan in August of 2018. We issued an RFP and ultimately selected PlaceWorks with DNV as a subconsultant to the contract. As you know, PlaceWorks is the consultant working on our general plan update, which provides for a lot of synchronicity and coordination. DNVGL is a consultant to the San Mateo County RICAPS program. The RICAPS program is a regional coordinating climate action working group that the county coordinates. So this, again, allows for a lot of coordination in how we partner with cities across the San Mateo County on our climate action work. And so this process began in October 2018.
Thank you for that introduction, Andrea. As Andrea mentioned, my name is Eli Crispy with PlaceWorks. I'm going to take you through a little more of the technical detail that's associated with the Climate Action Plan update. The process that we follow to update the CAP is what you see here. This is a very similar process to the one that was used to develop the 2015 CAP. So we've kept that same basic framework. I do want to point out that outreach with members of the public, with city staff, and with the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission was an integral component throughout the entire process. So outreach and engagement was a very important element from the beginning of the project all the way through to the present. The structure of the Climate Action Plan document itself, the 2020 update, is very much the same as the old one. we have gone in and made revisions and changes throughout the document. There is an update to a lot of the technical analyses that underlie the plan. We have updated the discussion of climate change science in the plan, since the science has evolved quite rapidly since 2015. As Andrea mentioned, we have incorporated the new state reduction targets. We have also made sure that the plan accounts for all of the efforts that San Mateo and its regional partners and the state government have made since 2015 in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. So those are all reflected in this updated document. The public engagement has been critical, as I mentioned. There have been 5 meetings with the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. There was also a study session with the City Council. We have had a meeting with the community members in June. We got about 50 attendees. It was, I think, very important, got some very important feedback out of that. And of course, there have been ongoing discussions with city staff. And all of the feedback that we've heard from these various groups and members of the public have been incorporated into the 2020 CAP. So the document that we're bringing forward very much reflects city staff, members of the public, and the City Commission. This is just an overview of the topics that we've brought forward at these past meetings. The green there you see, those are the discussion topics of the various sustainability and infrastructure commissions that we've attended, and then the updated CAP document that was brought forward to a City Council study session last month. So as I said, I'll walk through a bit of the technical detail with you, and this first section is what we call the greenhouse gas inventory. So this is an assessment of San Mateo's greenhouse gas emissions profile. We have we start with a inventory for the calendar year 2005. That sets the baseline, which is what we use to then measure change both since 2005 and projected forward into the future. We've updated the 2005 greenhouse gas inventory to be consistent with the best available science and practices. And really what's important to note here is that San Mateo's largest source of greenhouse gas emissions is on-road transportation, cars and trucks. It's about 43% of the city's greenhouse gas emissions. And then the two built environment sectors, those are electricity and natural gas use in buildings throughout San Mateo, public and private. Those make up 42%. And then various miscellaneous sources account for the remaining 15%. We also prepared a new greenhouse gas inventory for the calendar year 2017 to show how emissions in the city have changed over time. Overall, San Mateo's emissions have fallen about 18% below 2005 levels. So Andrea mentioned there was that 2020 target. The city set a target of being 15% below 2005 levels by 2020. As of 2017, the city was 18% below. So the trajectory is very positive there. Once we have the emissions profile, those inventories in place, we move forward to projecting what emissions might be like in the future. First, we prepare what is called a forecast, which is a sort of worst case scenario, and it shows what greenhouse gas emissions would likely look like in the future given current projections for population and job growth if no action was taken to reduce emissions in any way. And under that worst case scenario, we would project about a 23% increase in greenhouse gas emissions from the 2017 level to 2050. But of course, we know that's unrealistic. The city has already taken substantial action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, as has the state and regional agencies, Peninsula Clean Energy, for example. And so we next look at how those existing and planned programs are expected to affect future greenhouse gas emissions. And once those are factored in, we project a continued decrease in greenhouse gas emissions. So just looking at those existing actions or the ones that are planned to be implemented, we're projecting emissions would continue to fall by another 14% by 2050 relative to 2017 levels. The Climate Action Plan does include short, medium, and long-term greenhouse gas reduction targets. These are all developed to be consistent with the guidance that is published by the state. And we have made sure that these targets are appropriate not only for the city at a plan level, but also for project level efforts. And this helps ensure that the CAP is consistent with the state CEQA guidelines and that the CAP continues to serve as San Mateo's qualified greenhouse gas reduction strategy, which provides certain CEQA streamlining benefits to development project applicants. And because we are continuing to be consistent with the CEQA guidelines and continuing to serve as that greenhouse gas reduction strategy, that is in part why this document does require the EIR addendum. So the 2020 target in the new climate action plan remains unchanged, 15% below 2005 levels, which, as we noted, the city is, as of 2017 at least, below that level and is, in all likelihood, going to remain below that level. For the medium and long-term targets, the 2030 and 2050 targets, the state has recommended that cities adopt a per capita or per person target. So we have carried forward that guidance into the Climate Action Plan update. And when the state guidance documents and state guidance targets are adopted to a local level, it translates to 4.3 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions per person in 2030, and 1.2 metric tons of greenhouse gas emissions per person by 2050. So once we have established those targets, we next move forward to identifying the strategies to achieve them. We started off by looking at the measures that are in the 2015 CAP and recognizing that they are already a very good foundation. So we looked at how we might be able to revise those existing measures and build on them to continue to carry them forward. There were a few measures that are either completed or for whatever reason are no longer really relevant to the city, so we've removed a couple of them. And then that still left a bit of a gap. We wanted to make sure that changes in technology and best practices that were not available back in 2015 would be carried over into this new CAP. You know, that the CAP continues to let the city kind of serve as a leader in greenhouse gas reduction. So we have drafted some new measures to fill in those gaps that weren't covered by the existing climate action plan. The measures themselves come from a variety of sources, reflects all the different input that we've received. In addition to the 2015 CAP, there was, of course, a public workshop, the conversation with city staff, and feedback from the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. We have closely synced up the reduction measures in the Climate Action Plan with the RICAP's regional effort, just to make sure that the reductions that San Mateo is bringing forward are also consistent with the reductions that are occurring up and down throughout the peninsula. And then, as I mentioned, we have pulled in those emerging issues and best practices to really keep the city on the cutting edge. The measures fall into 9 different categories seen here. 8 of these are pretty much the same as the existing Climate Action Plan with a few tweaks to the language. There is one new one, which is building electrification, and that reflects an option that really was not on the radar for a lot of people, wasn't really feasible back in 2015, but is now very much an emerging topic and one that cities up and down the state are starting to look at. This is an example of one of the strategies. As you can see, there is a topic, an overarching discussion of what the strategy is, and then a set of recommended actions, which are very specific steps that the city can take to ensure implementation of the strategy. And these implementation actions can be policies, they can be regulations, city programs, educational opportunities, any other effort that might allow the city to achieve this target. So that brings us just to the general plan amendments. With the introduction of the 2020 CAP, that has necessitated some minor changes to the city's current circulation, housing, and land use elements to include the new greenhouse gas inventory, the revised targets, the new strategies. We have updated the regulatory framework discussions in these elements since the state's regulations have changed quite a bit since 2015. And these elements also discuss the city's completed and ongoing existing actions. So we have revised that to ensure that it is continued to be current. The EIR addendum that staff is bringing forward is an updated addendum to the 2030 General Plan EIR, continues to ensure that the General Plan is consistent with the state CEQA guidelines, and that the qualified greenhouse gas reduction strategy status is maintained. The EIR addendum continues to find no new impacts or increased severity of existing impacts from the 2020 Climate Action Plan. So this is the recommendation that staff is bringing forward to adopt a resolution recommending approval of the general plan update to revise the land use circulation and housing elements, and the addendum number 2 to the general plan environmental impact report for the 2020 Climate Action Plan. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do any commissioners have any questions or clarifying questions from that presentation? Okay, we'll start. Commissioner Mallory.
These are just very basic questions. What is a point source?
A point source is sort of a single, usually a large facility that is emitting pollution and greenhouse gases from a sort of industrial process or like a large generator, for example. It's the pollution is, or the greenhouse gas emissions are coming from a single location, hence the term point source.
Okay, so that helps. And then I'll hold off on my others. Thank you.
Okay. Commissioner Ebneter?
Through the chair. Just a few questions for staff. The qualified inventory for the greenhouse gas emissions, is that the statement where we've removed like the husbandry and the farming and different components that are addressed elsewhere in the state by other caps? Is that what the qualified component means?
The qualified component means that it meets certain requirements that are laid out in the CEQA guidelines. And those guidelines basically say that the cap has to include an inventory, a forecast, that has to set meaningful targets, and that has to lay out strategies to achieve the targets, and that it be implementable, that it be able to be monitored, and that it be adopted through a public process.
Okay.
That's what the state requires.
Okay, so I had seen somewhere in the documents that some of the components, statewide components, are taken out of our cap locally because we don't generate those gases here. And I think they specifically called husbandry and some farming, maybe some industries. I'm not sure. I didn't know that that was part of the component. That was all.
Right. The Climate Action Plan addresses greenhouse gas emissions that are directly attributable to San Mateo. So because there is no farming activities here, farming is not part of the Climate Action Plan.
Great. So I'm sure it was discussed in the document. I'm sure I read it. But how does the overall greenhouse gas inventory reflect the switch from level of service, if it ever did include that, to VMT, which would be miles that are going to be accumulated outside of our boundaries, or some of them?
Right. So the Climate Action Plan has always looked at VMT as a way of measuring the emissions associated with transportation.
Great.
So that has remained unchanged in the 2020 cap.
Okay, great. I think a couple years ago there was a report written by the California Resources Board that said by 2020 they projected small hand equipment and lawn equipment was going to surpass transportation as the leading greenhouse gas emission producer. Is there any discussion of that still going on, or where it's, because it's such a small amount of this reduction?
Right. I can't speak to that specific report. I'm not familiar with that, but those small pieces of equipment that you addressed, those are included in the off-road equipment sector,
right,
which in 2017 was about 45,000 metric tons. On-road transportation was 270,000.
Right.
So I'm not sure what that report was specifically getting at, but at least in San Mateo, those activities are a relatively small portion of the city's overall profile. I think about 8%.
Okay. And I know the city has different garbage stations or garbage collection systems in the parks and in public areas. And there's a picture on page 85 of the report which shows compost, garbage, and recycling units on the exterior near a park or something. Is the city implementing using the composting now at the parks, or is it still just the 2 bins? Do you know?
I believe it depends on the park, but I've definitely seen composting, for example, in Ryder Park near the large picnic area.
Right.
So I can't tell you whether it's in every park, but I definitely know we have it in some places.
Okay, thank you, Kathy. One last quick question. I don't know where this falls into the overall scope, but I have been to fast food restaurants a couple times in my life, and it seems like everything gets dumped into the garbage, including the plastic, whatever food waste there might be. And I don't know if the state has ever implemented any guidelines around food waste, specifically in fast food restaurants. Is there any talk about that?
I'm not sure about fast food restaurants specifically, but I know that composting in commercial businesses and in restaurants is complex, and it's going to be an important piece moving forward to address the emissions from landfills. So it is included in our climate action plan.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for the staff? Okay.
Hi. So I was just looking at the page about Peninsula Clean Energy, and I have a couple questions. One is just kind of a general question that, how, across the state, how common is it for there to be these clean energy programs? I think are we in the Bay Area pretty unique in that respect?
The concentration of those programs is probably highest in the Bay Area, and this is certainly where the type of program began. Marin was the first one to do it. But these programs are growing in popularity pretty significantly, and they're now present in most regions of the state. So there are even a few in the Central Valley. There's very large ones in Los Angeles. San Diego is exploring them.
Okay.
The deserts, they're becoming more and more common now.
Okay, great. And I was curious because it says that the PC opt-out rate for 2020 is 2%, which seems so funny because the default is to opt in, is to be, using Peninsula Clean Energy. So you really have to go to some effort to opt out. And I had intended to opt into the higher level, and that took some effort for me to remember to do that. And I finally recently did that, the 100%, or I can't recall what it was, but it was not the default level, but the slightly higher level. What's the rate for that? I'm just curious if you know that.
I had just looked up that number, but I can't remember. It is.
That's okay.
It's not very high, and I can always follow up with you after.
Okay.
But there's been, since Peninsula Clean Energy has very ambitious goals to move towards greenhouse gas-free electricity for all customers and 100% renewable electricity for all customers in upcoming years, the focus has been more on the procurement for all customers instead of campaigns to have people opt up because
Yeah.
they're already providing such clean electricity.
And to prevent people from opting out altogether. So I think that's all I had, really.
Thank you. Commissioner Maldonado, any questions for staff?
So I do have a question. So in the actual housing element attachment, Exhibit AII draft amendment, on page 70, you reference specific recommendation actions, which are provide funding to support energy efficiency education and low-cost retrofits for low-income households, promote financially programs. Where is the funding for all of these different initiatives going to be coming from?
So for the funding that's provided it was for low-cost energy
Yes.
efficiency retrofits. The city had received a grant previously to fund that program.
So
to
if
help
that's grant
contribute.
money, so once that grant money expires or it's all used up, would there be additional resources to support these different initiatives?
The city has a specific sustainability budget that could continue to contribute.
Okay.
And just to add, through the chair, we do also leverage a lot of resources that are available through county programs. So sometimes we're just promoting programs that the county's funding on their own.
Okay, thank you. That actually was going to be one of my questions, so thank you, Commissioner Maldonado. I only had a couple of questions. One was, if we look at this, actually this slide that is up, can you help me understand what makes up on-road transportation? Does that include transient vehicles going on 101 or 280, just crossing through, or is it meant only to reflect vehicle usage within the city? Can you just help me understand what that means?
Absolutely. It refers to any trip that begins and or ends within San Mateo, so any vehicle miles associated with that. So if you drive just within San Mateo, all of those miles are counted. If you drive, say, from San Mateo to San Francisco or San Jose, half of those miles are counted towards the city's numbers that you see here. The other half go to the other city. But if you were to drive from San Jose to San Francisco and just pass through San Mateo and not stop, the miles from that trip are not included here. That's because that's not something that the city is really influencing or driving that trip.
So the adoption of electric vehicles would be one of the drivers of a drop in these measurables?
Yes, because even though VMT in San Mateo has increased since 2005, the overall fuel efficiency of vehicles has also increased quite a bit, and that includes the adoption of electric vehicles. So that's responsible for that modest decline that you see there.
It is it was surprising that it's so modest, considering the adoption of electric vehicles. I would expect it to increase as the inventory of options and that goes over through 2050. Is that something that's contemplated? When I look at the reductions from cap measures, look at page 48 of this. Is there one of the reductions in here that would be associated with that electrical vehicle adoption?
Yeah, there's a few, yes. There are state programs that are expected to continue to cause increase in the adoption of electric vehicles and greater adoption of more fuel-efficient vehicles. So those are factored in as one of those existing and planned actions. And then as far as the policies in the 2020 cap goes, there are multiple ones that are intended to drive more fuel-efficient vehicles, more electric vehicles. So those are all part of the overall change strategy.
Okay. Oh, we have one more question from Commissioner Mallory.
Couldn't find it before. So on page 2-43, under waste and recycling, it was talking about the composting in single-family homes, businesses, and then exploring alternative forms of waste collection to support composting in multifamily situations. So when I lived in a house, I was a rabid composter. And I now live in a multifamily situation, and there is no composting whatsoever. So I just wondered, what is the alternative form of collecting it that's planned going forward?
So composting in multifamily is a very complex topic. I think that it's definitely an opportunity to reduce emissions and divert compostable materials from the landfill. But what I've heard and understood to be challenging in multifamily is both the storage of an additional bin for compostable materials, as well as the contamination or the potential for contamination, because you really need to have everyone in the multifamily property on board and participating in the program if you're going to add an extra service to the building. It also requires the property owners buy-in to add this extra service, because it does come at an additional cost. So multifamily composting comes with its challenges, but I know it will be important moving forward to address emissions.
And to further answer your question, so while we are looking at how to get just traditional composting into multifamily, there are other technologies that are being explored. So one of them is multi-stream diversion, where they collect all garbage, recycling, composting in one, and then sort it at the waste facility at that point. So I think that's one of the things, the alternate technologies that section was referencing. That has costs and downsides as well. So I don't know ultimately what will end up being implemented.
Thank you.
Okay.
Through the chair, I have one additional question. Somewhere I read that the city was looking to create a program to provide either free or subsidized shade trees to homes for cooling. Are those for existing homes or homes that are looking to be retrofit?
That language wasn't specified because we wanted to explore what the program could look like. So I think it could be either.
Okay. So there's no, so it'll be a new program to provide trees for, or shading for existing homes, right?
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any public speakers who would like to speak on this agenda item?
I have no slots.
Anybody? Okay. We'll close public comment on this item, which I know reflects quite a bit of effort and progress from the City Council and the Sustainability and Infrastructure Commission. So a lot of good work gone into this. Before we go to vote on the resolution, would anyone like to make any final comments before we go to that?
Well, I just want to say I wasn't really aware of this until I received it and started looking at it. And as you know, I'm kind of new to the Planning Commission, so it wasn't really on my radar. I'm really impressed with it, and I'm really excited to be part of a city that is doing so much work to meet these goals. So thanks, kudos to all the participants on this.
Any comments, Commissioner Mallory?
I will echo Margaret's comments about being proud to be in San Mateo and being in a city that is so committed to doing all this. And when I was reading things, what stood out to me was it seemed like for so long waste was a sign of the cost of progress, whether it was belching factories or whatever. And the technology's focused on more and more and more of that. Now it's so exciting to see that the technologies are focusing on reducing that rather than making it as a form of progress. So it's very interesting, and this is it's an outstanding package. So thank you for that.
I want to echo what my other commissioner said, and in reading it, I actually like the inclusiveness that a lot of the language included in here. It helps that we're looking at reducing all of our carbon footprints, but looking at all of San Mateo and providing programs or providing financial programs and incentives to even our low-income neighborhoods who might not have the financial resources to be able to do it. So I'm encouraged by all the language that we have in here, and I look forward for it to be adopted.
Through the chair, I have one tiny point to make about a possible typo on Chapter 4 of the implementation. In the second paragraph, and I'm only telling you this so it doesn't go out to the public with it. Midway through that paragraph, maybe about 8 lines down, it says, due to the ongoing changes in technology and regulations and the emergency of new best practices. I don't know if that was a typo?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I was honored to be able to serve on the first Sustainability Commission for a year, unfortunately only 1 year, but it was such an educational time for me, and it's given me a great respect for what amount of time and effort needs to go into these projects. I think that this package is so well organized, that the information presents, it's very clear, concise, and just a really good packet. I also find it impressive that the city has very clearly acknowledged the highly vulnerable state that we live in, and here in San Mateo, specifically looking at the devastating effects of climate change, from sea level rise to fire exposure through water insecurity. being one of the most vulnerable cities and the most vulnerable county in California to sea level rise is very challenging and daunting for all of us. And I'm really happy to see that the concentration that was put into this packet. I hope that this packet is the #1 document that the city planners and the department heads look at when they start to make their decisions in their capital improvement programs. I know that's a challenge, but I think this is item #1, which should be referenced. With that said, I would like to see a stronger statement on the importance of housing and its direct relation to the reduction in greenhouse gases in the executive and introduction summaries, as I think the housing is going to be key to us to reducing our greenhouse gases. I think it's obvious. It's 40% of the problem. We need to get more people here, and I'd like to see a real strong acknowledgement of that. As Commissioner Allen had mentioned, I was actually the commissioner who I think was the biggest advocate to include composting in the original cap. The rest of the commissioners went along with us, and the same hurdles were in place then as are now. It's nice to hear, Kathy, that there are some thoughts of technology, if you will, of a single source could help it. But knowing that the release of methane gas, which is 8 times stronger than the other gases that we're trying to combat, I think it's something that really needs to be addressed. I know all the households do it. I think it's great. But 50% of our residents are now living in rental units. And I think somehow it really should be addressed aggressively. I hope you guys can make some more progress in that. Also, I know that Kathy and the staff have done some great things with solar, being the first to require some solar components in the state, which is great. I know the REACH codes are pushing people and encouraging. I've also been told that Pacifica, Menlo Park, and Brisbane may be outpacing us now, so I think that's our competition to get us back into first place and be the leaders here in San Mateo County. The best of luck with that. I hope that you're able to make those things happen. And one of the things that has, I think, challenges all of us are our existing building stock. What do you do with it? How do you fix it? Because it's 95% of what we're living in, and how do you really reach those people? You do have some good programs here, and most of them obviously are incentivized and not paid for, if you will. But it's kind of easy to make new stuff really good, but it's real hard to get all the rest of the other stuff. And again, I think it's a great packet. There's always room for improvement because the challenges in front of us are so daunting. It's somewhat overbearing or overwhelming, but thank you for the great work.
Thank you, Commissioner Ebner. So I'll keep my comments brief. So I would echo the other commissioners' comments on the comprehensive nature of the report. I thought that the red lines that were provided were very clear and helpful to point out what has been changed, and noting that this document is reflective of the multiple iterations of work that the Sustainability Infrastructure Commission put into the project, as well as the City Council study session in January. So I have no other comments other than just to recognize the work that's gone into this, and very supportive of the Climate Action Plan progress that the city continues to innovate with. So with that, can I get a motion on the recommendation that is in front of us? From anyone? Anybody? Which is here on the screen.
So I would move to adopt the resolution recommending City Council adoption of the general plan amendments and the EIR addendum as adequate in satisfying the requirements pursuant to CEQA regulations for the draft 2020 Climate Action Plan.
Is that consistent with, okay.
I second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any against? Okay, that resolution recommendation passes 5-0. Thank you.
And this recommendation will be moving forward to the city council. I'm not sure, have we established the specific date yet?
We do not have a specific date yet.
So it'll be in the March, April timeframe.
March, April, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next on the agenda is reports and announcements.
Yes, just a preview of your upcoming meetings at your February 25th meeting. I think it follows along the line of Commissioner Ebeneter's question about VMT. There'll be a study session as we start to develop policy consistent with SB 743, utilizing VMT as a metric as opposed to level of service for CEQA documents. There's not going to be a firm proposal, but it'll be more of an introduction, some larger topics for the discussion of the commission as we hone in on things and get them adopted by the July 1st deadline.
Okay.
Your March 10th meeting, right now all we have is an annual review of the development agreement for Station Park Green. So that'll be taking a look at where the development stands, as well as conformance with all the conditions of the development agreement. Also in March are a whole series of general plan workshops and neighborhood meetings. StriveSanMateo.org has a listing of those, and we'll make sure that you get copies of the flyers. Again, this iteration of workshops, as well as a general plan subcommittee, which is tentatively scheduled for the end of April, will eventually lead into a planning commission study session as we look at developing alternative land use scenarios, particularly to be examined as part of the general plan update. And that concludes the staff announcements.
Okay. Any other announcements from any commissioners? No? Okay. Well, then we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
So now that the meeting's adjourned,